Go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone. This is our 11th week of hosting the WSU Food Systems COVID-19 Hub meetings. And we like to go through our archives and try to find pictures of times in the past when we were able to get together and enjoy connecting face to face. And this was a picture of Melanie Edwards from Wildwood Farm for one of our farm walks that was in October of 2018. And just really excited to be able to work with Melanie. She's been an incredible leader with several different initiatives to support Black farmers in the Pacific Northwest, and has been a really active member of the Black Food Sovereignty Coalition. So I'm excited to have a picture of her up here, and maybe she's even in our hub meeting today. So I know that she pops in periodically. So welcome again, all of you. So our meeting overview today, we're just going to give some background on the WSU Food Systems program, talk a little bit about the needs assessment tool, and then have some guest presenters today from the Washington State Conservation Commission. We have Ron Shultz. From King Conservation District, we have Carrie King. And then from Kitsap Conservation District, we have Diane Fish. And then anything else that we want to share and talk about. So just a reminder to use the Zoom chat box to introduce yourself, who you are, where you're located, and what you do. And we really encourage you to use the chat box also to share resources, information about your program, upcoming events, links to valuable resources that you want to be able to share with the group. And we will then download that chat dialogue. We are also making it available through a PDF if you want one, so that we can capture those resources, and you have a transcript of the call as well within the chat box. And just a reminder that we are recording these hub meetings are being posted on our YouTube channel. So you can go and look at those as well if you want to go back and look at any of the past meetings that we've hosted. So I just wanted to first start out by talking about some of the work that we've been doing over the past, well, really several months, but also past couple of weeks. So this is a racial equity statement that the Food Systems Steering Committee developed over the last week or so. And I'm just going to read it out to all of you. And it's really based on our framework of connecting, learning, and growing as we support the food system. And this is something that we're also really interested in how the hub evolves. We're really excited with the participation that we've had over the last almost 3 months, and looking at making the hub less, still focusing on COVID, but also focusing on racism in the food system and how to make a more accessible and equitable food system overall. So really bringing in some additional work that we can do in these weekly meetings. So in terms of connecting, Black Lives Matter, we stand in solidarity with Black, Indigenous, and people of color worldwide, fighting for food security, human health and nutrition, sustainable production, seed sovereignty, and land rights. The right to healthy food connects all people. As we learn, the inequities that persist in our farm and food system today are the direct result of generations of injustice and exploitation. It is long past time for dismantling the structural racism at the root of our land grant institutions and systems. We commit to listening and studying to learn the deeper roots of structural racism in order to co-create just food systems and grow. Amplify the voices, dreams, stories, and businesses of Black, Indigenous, and people of color. The WSU Food Systems Program will use our platforms and resources to support anti-racist pedagogy. We invite all members of the WSU community to join our collective efforts to transform ourselves, our relationships, and our system through critical self-reflection, courageous conversations, and bold actions. And so we hope every single week to be able to provide some resources and updates of what we're trying to do to become anti-racist in the work that we're doing within the WSU Food Systems Program. One of the things that we've already done is participated, many of us on the team And within the office participated in a Facing Racism program last year that was offered through WSU. And this program is being really, there's been a lot of energy, obviously, in the last couple of months, especially in the last couple of weeks, to try to really move forward with more training for both faculty, staff, and volunteers. And one of the things that's coming out of the Facing Racism group within WSU is a book club. And so we're hoping to plug in anyone who wants within this forum to participate in the book club that's going to be facilitated through the Facing Racism group as well. So we'll just keep you updated. There will be hopefully online curricula that you can take based on this national curricula, Facing Racism, that we're also hoping that you all have access to. If you have any questions about this, please feel free to reach out to myself or Nicole Witham. We both went through the training, and Nicole is going to be participating on Monday in the planning team as well. And I just wanted to provide a recommended reading for a Juneteenth celebration. So today is a celebration of the end of slavery within the United States. And I grew up in the Pacific Northwest in a very white community in Burien. And I had never heard of Juneteenth until I moved to Baltimore. So, and having had the incredible experience of living in Baltimore for 6 years, I was able to participate in many community events that really embraced Juneteenth as a holiday and a celebration. And it's exciting to see information about Juneteenth really become much more pervasive, especially throughout the Pacific Northwest. And I'm really hopeful that it will someday become a state and federal holiday. I wanted to provide a recommended reading and to follow Michael Twitty. So he's an incredible scholar who wrote a book called The Cooking Gene. And this is an article also that came out this week in The Forward, which is a Jewish publication. The Chef Who Blends Kosher and Soul Talks Juneteenth Food as a Form of Resistance. His book, The Cooking Gene, won the 2018 James Beard Foundation Book of the Year. He's an incredible scholar. I had the honor of actually being able to co-present with him on diaspora and food about 10 years ago at the University, or the College of Charleston. And I encourage all of you to follow him, to get this book if you can and read it. He's just really an incredible scholar, and you'll see a lot of information coming out over this past week that includes him as someone really talking about the legacy of the African diaspora and food in our country. So again, I just encourage you all to look into his work. Okay, so another update is also another survey. So this week, yesterday, a survey went live that was co-created by the University of Washington and Washington State University, looking at food security to understand how COVID has impacted all of us in Washington. It's a consumer research survey. All Washington residents over 18 can participate, and you'll be entered into a drawing to win one of 50 $50 grocery cards. And so here's a link here to participate in this. It's been disseminated widely, so you may have already seen it through some of your lists and social media that you follow. So again, I'm just encouraging people. We've already had 80 people as of this morning participate in it since we launched it yesterday afternoon. We're hoping to get at least 1,000 respondents. So again, this has been a really exciting project. It was funded by the University of Washington through some of their internal grant funds that they released to understand the impact of COVID. And we're just really excited to see both of our institutions partnering together on this work. So a little bit about the food systems program. We seek to work with communities throughout the state to foster viable farm businesses, optimize sustainable natural resource stewardship, and to promote scaled processing and distribution, always in the pursuit of access to healthy food for all. This statement has always been important to us as a program, and it's even more important as we move through COVID and looking at structural racism in the US as well as other issues that really compromise our food system. Again, just looking at the network that we have across the state, and also encouraging you, if you don't have access to broadband, to be able to reach out to your local extension office to see if they have a site available for you in their parking lot, to be able to then participate not only in meetings like this, but in all the work that's important to be done right now across the state. Okay, so the WSU Food Systems COVID-19 Hub, the purpose of the hub is to provide a space to connect regularly with WSU and external partners working across the food system, to collect and update resources that we post on our website, to be able to deploy and use our dynamic needs assessment tool, the NAT, and to provide space and time to share stories and receive support from one another. Our calendar of events page is also something that we update regularly with events, webinars, trainings, and workshops. This is an old image that I captured off of it from a couple of weeks ago, but you can see if you go to our calendar of events, events coming up really throughout the entire summer. And then our needs assessment tool. So we'll post a link to this in the chat box. We encourage you to fill it out every single week, send it out to your lists. You can post it on your website, however you want to get this out. It was co-designed with Rebecca Sarro, our WSU evaluation specialist, and we're really hoping to be able to capture both the needs and changes across the food system as we move through COVID. Okay, so that was my introduction. Again, I hope that you're using the chat box to introduce yourselves. And I wanted to check in too and see if Ron is on the call.
Ron is here.
Yep, great.
I have made him a co-host, so welcome, Ron.
Welcome, Ron. So we're going to hear from Ron Shultz, Kerry King, and Diane Fish. And I believe Ron's going to go first, so I'm going to go ahead and mute myself. And Ron, if you have any slides or anything that you want to share, I can stop sharing my screen as well.
Yeah, I do have a document that I'd like to put on the screen. I'm not sure, I haven't done that on Zoom before, so you might have to walk me through it.
Sure, Ron. So as Laura unshares her item, at the bottom of your screen, you should see a icon or a button that says share screen in your Zoom platform. Okay. Click that.
Yeah.
And then it'll ask you which item you would like to share. And so in your case, you had a Word document.
Yep.
And then
share. There we go. Can you see it?
Wait for it. There we go. And you can go into full screen mode on your computer if you'd like. And then that way it won't show all of your Word items around the outside of the document.
Okay. I'll just go ahead and leave it like this.
Sure. Take it away, Ron.
So anyway, thank you for the opportunity to chat with you all today about the work the Conservation Commission and the conservation districts are doing in the food system arena. And it's a very timely conversation to have with you all. First, a little background. One of the things that we are involved in at the Commission in collaboration with the Washington Department of Agriculture and Laura Raymond there is the State Food Policy Forum. This forum has been in place for the past 3 years now. It's been implemented through budget proviso that our two agencies have received funding for and some direction in the proviso. The forum is co-led by the directors of the Department of Agriculture, the Conservation Commission, and the Office of Farmland Preservation. And the forum consists of representatives from food system, different aspects of the food system, including hunger groups, food banks, farmers markets, and we've also got agriculture at the table, commodity groups like the Potato Commission, Horticulture, Farm Bureau, and others. So it's a really good mix of folks that are involved in the Food Policy Forum. The forum, just this last session, there was legislation that put the forum in law, so it's in our statute. That's really good news. We don't have to go with every 2 years making sure we have a budget proviso to implement the forum. So it'll be a good place as we move forward over the years to help collaborate and coordinate some aspects of the food system and food policy work going on in the state. In that regard, we were asked by the governor's office in March when the COVID-19 was first rearing its head. The governor's office asked the forum to convene and evaluate recommendations for early implementation of what we could do to address the dire needs in the food system. Of course, the governor's office has a food team that has been focused on immediate actions, how to utilize COVID-19 funding to help get food into food banks and other resources. And so that's a more immediate implementation group. The Food Policy Forum is looking at more intermediate and longer term objectives around how COVID-19 has impacted the food system. And so the forum met, we had several teams around recommendations that met over the course of April and May to help formulate some recommendations. And what you're seeing is the draft early implementation report. It just went out to the forum and out for review. And the forum has a meeting next week on the 25th to take final action on the recommendations. I believe you can find the report. If you want to review this, you can find it at our website at the Conservation Commission, which is scc.wa.gov. So you can go to scc.wa.gov, look under programs for food policy forum, and you might see it there. If you don't see it, shoot me an email and I can make it available to you. I just really quickly, I won't go through all of this, but I just wanted to highlight for you, sorry for the scrolling, but I just wanted to highlight for you how we approach this issue of the response under COVID and its impacts on the food system. Again, we were looking at various stages of action that needed to be done. You'll see an overview here of how the food system has been impacted. But how we approached this was we were looking for actions, and you'll see recommendations if you get a copy of the report. You'd see in there a number of recommendations that look at immediate term, which are things to do between June and September of this year, near term, things to do October to December of this year, and then midterm, which is January to March. The reason we did it this way is the immediate and near term, we were thinking in the context of a potential special session. And we already just seeing, just this morning, in fact, you're getting some legislative interest in some of the items that are identified in the report. And so if the legislature meets in special session, there might be some opportunity to look at potential funding for some of these actions. And then the idea about midterm is looking at actions to take into the legislative session starting in January of 2021. So we walked through what some of the vulnerabilities that were exposed in the food system because of the pandemic, some of these issues you all have talked about. But what we did was, you'll see in the report, we divided it into basically what we call 4 challenges that came about as a result of COVID-19 and the challenges that it posed on the food system. And so challenge 1, we describe how COVID-19 threatens the economic viability of individual ag and food enterprises, and that the businesses needed relief and resources to help them remain economically viable and operational. And it's just to get at the notion of how many farms had to pivot and serve new markets and different demands. So for example, you had some farmers that had contracts with restaurants. The restaurants closed, so now they have all this food that they're growing. How do they pivot to be able to access new markets and meet new needs, not only during the pandemic, but beyond? Challenge number 2 is focusing on public health responses relating to shifts in the food system and supports and investments to maintain capacity and flexibility in the food system. This gets at the notion of how, as we've talked about here, and then also other meetings, how COVID-19 and the response to that in terms of social distancing and a lot of people losing their jobs and so forth, created increased demand in food banks and created a system where we needed to get, as you know, food into the food banks, and how do we distribute food to those people who need it with an infrastructure that perhaps wasn't well suited to do that. So the classic example is a lot of fresh produce, and how do you get fresh produce into a system that that wasn't really set up to handle that kind of a fresh produce kind of system. How do we take advantage of infrastructure like food processing to help get food into a condition where it can be distributed easily that people can use? How do you take 1 billion pounds of potatoes that they can't sell, and how do you break that down so it can be distributed to people? Those kinds of challenges. Challenge 3 is looking at the need for nutrition services and assistance. This gets at a lot of relief programs might be structured in a particular way pre-COVID that don't really help us meet the needs post-COVID and some of the demands there based on high unemployment and economic insecurity. So what changes in these programs and services need to happen in order to help meet the need? And then finally, looking at how the COVID-19 kind of exposed the need for resiliency in our food system, not only in the face of a pandemic, but in the face of climate change and the impacts that climate change would bring into the system. So this is the nature of the report. I won't walk through all the recommendations and so forth under each challenge because there's quite a few, but urge you to go to our webpage and take a look. And again, if you don't find it, just shoot me an email and we'll be able to get that for you. The other thing that we're going to be doing, and this will be a segue to the other presenters, is we'll be working with our conservation districts across the state and identifying work that conservation districts, sub-districts are currently doing to help make connections between farmers and not only markets, but also other places where they can connect and get food into the system, and the work that helping farmers, districts providing technical assistance to farmers in that regard. There's also the important need to continue to work with farmers on their property and improving conditions on the property so they can stay economically viable during this time. And so what we're going to be doing is sharing information that districts are currently doing with our districts across the state, and encouraging our districts across the state to increase engagement into the food system so that we can help make those connections. And so I think the next presenters will talk about the work that they're doing in their particular conservation districts to help make that happen. So with that, that's pretty much where we are. We have been asked by the governor's office to submit a funding proposal decision package around the food policy forum. So we'll be working with Department of Agriculture on that and what that might look like. And again, just starting just today, hearing that there'll be legislative interest in some of this. So please take a look at the report. Happy to answer any questions if there are any there. I don't see any questions. Oh, thanks for posting, Laura, our webpage and the connection to the report.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much, Ron, for giving such a great overview. Sure. And I'm sure we will have questions as we progress through the meeting. So people often will post them in the chat box, and then we'll make sure we call on people or at least address the questions. Are there anyone want to ask a question now before we move on to our next speaker? Okay, well, you're going to be on the phone still, or you'll be on the call for the next few minutes, right, Ron? So if we do have questions.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'll stay
okay.
Yep.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, so we're going to move on to Kerry King, who's one of the district staff for King Conservation District.
Hi there. I think I spoke to you guys a couple weeks ago when we were first kind of kicking this idea around, and since then we have completed the draft of our support service, and so I wanted to share a little bit more about that with you guys. We have finally come up with a name for it called the KCD Farm Helpline and Navigation Service. And what it is essentially a couple people on the farm team are reaching out and calling our less technologically savvy dairy farmers and beef producers and cooperators, both inside KCD and outside, and just seeing if they need a little extra help, a personal touch, finding different resources. So we went to thousands of websites, but mostly WSU, farmkingcounty.org, Washington Young Farmers, compiled all the tools that everyone had already worked so hard on and just kind of distilled it down into different buckets or categories and came up with a narrative so that when we're on the phone, we can focus right in on what people are most interested in or what they feel like that they need the most help with. This kind of came about, this charge came about from our board when they asked us to develop this because they themselves were finding, which they're all farmers, they were overwhelmed with the amount of information and the links that led to various links that led to links, and then just trying to keep up with this daily and their operation in their fields and their animals. They just found it overwhelming, and so they thought that maybe a little bit more of a personal touch might be really helpful. So we pretty much took all the different categories that everyone had, including financial services and safety and protection, including human, animal, and food, business planning, market opportunities, legal support, labor, shared resources, and a miscellaneous bucket, kind of a catch-all bucket, so that we can skip around and help guide people to the right help. So we're not claiming to be first responders, and we're certainly not ensuring that people will get the loans that they apply for, but we are just acting more like a connector. I think I saw that Megan Weldon was on the call too, and she was also on the team. Megan, do you have anything that you want to add?
No, I don't think so.
She's also our dairy planner, and we noticed this on our last Zoom phone call where we had a King County farmer phone call to learn what they were most concerned about right now. And several of the dairy farmers asked Megan, well, what is Zoom? I think I would like to tune in, but I don't even know what Zoom is, or I don't know how to put it on my computer. So that's when we realized there was this disconnect, that not everybody might be getting the same information. So.
Great. I'm wondering, where can people find information about how to connect with a district staff?
That's a good question. So right now we're kind of in our soft rollout stage, and we're calling all the dairy farmers and the beef producers and kind of ironing out the kinks. And then in the next couple of weeks, we will reach out to you and farmkingcounty.org and just slowly start asking people to post it on their website if they want to, because it's just pretty much Megan and I answering the phone. And so, yeah, so we don't want to be too overwhelmed at this point. But we do hope to expand it as we get better and get more efficient and are more, well, when I'm more able to open up my plate to be able to do this more than just on top of my existing workload. So stay tuned, more to come. But if they want to reach out, they're welcome to email or call me, and I will post that in the group chat.
Great. And I don't want to take all the questions. I have another question though. So if anyone else has questions, please go ahead and post them in the chat box or speak up. I wanted to know if you are aware of other district offices across the state who are doing any similar programs. And maybe this is also a question for Ron, if you know of what's kind of happening across the 45 offices in terms of developing programs like this.
Across the state, we're going to be doing a survey actually that'll go out on Monday to all conservation districts to survey what they're doing and their role is in the food system. We get sporadic information from different conservation districts about not only the programs that they currently have, but we're also going to survey about programs that they're interested in doing given what's happened with COVID-19 and the need to respond. So we'll be sending that survey out in the next, again on Monday, and so we should be getting responses in the next few weeks so that we can get a really clear picture as to what not only the conservation districts are currently doing, but what their interests are in the system.
That's great. We'd love to be able to host you or someone else from the State Conservation Commission to report out on those results just as resource providers, so we can see how we can pivot our work to support the districts as well.
Yeah, would be happy to do that.
That's great.
Ron, we would be interested in those results as well.
Oh yeah, we'll send it out to all conservation districts, Carrie, as well.
Great.
Not only the survey itself, you'll get to see that, but also we'll make sure that all conservation districts get to see the results, because what we really want to do is share information between districts so that they can know what programs are being done and what's possible in their district.
Great.
Other questions for Carrie and King Conservation District? And again, you can always use the chat box. I know Carrie was going to put some contact information in there for all of you, and please reach out to her either through the chat or just let us know if you have a question.
This is Abba Kaiser with the WSU Food Systems Program. And Ron, I had a question for you. It's a little bit off topic, but there are some grants available through the Department of Ecology for conservation tillage for small grains farmers. And I'm just wondering if that's something that you would be interested in having a conversation with me about in terms of, just implementation with conservation districts statewide.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's definitely a topic that we'd be very interested. I'd be happy to have the conversation with you.
Awesome. I'll send an email.
Great, thank you.
Okay, great. Well, we have Diane Fish up next, and she's with Kitsap Conservation District and was also a longtime affiliate and employee of WSU associated with the Kitsap program as well. So Diane, welcome, and we're excited to hear what's happening in Kitsap.
Can everybody hear me now? Okay. Yeah, I'm Diane Fish, and I'm a resource planner at Kitsap Conservation District, and I do farm planning for small and sustainable farms in Kitsap, as well as I manage the Grace Garden Project, which the image on the screen there, we have a high tunnel and we grow some stuff. Okay, why is it, there we go. So for those of you, we're in Kitsap. So we're really focused because of our location. We're focused a lot on water quality. One of our main partners, and you can see it on the slides there, is the Clean Water Kitsap Partnership. And so we do a lot of different stuff. We have low impact development and a bunch of other stuff that we're doing. But in 2017, we applied for a grant through the National Association of Conservation Districts Urban Agriculture Initiative, and we were funded, and so we started the GRACE project. And it stands for Gardening for Restoration and Conservation Education. And our initial focus was on providing fresh vegetables for the Central Kitsap Food Bank and doing workshops for urban residents on growing food and protecting water quality, because there was a strong focus on urban agriculture, and restorative justice opportunities for female inmates from the Mission Creek Correctional Center for Women, which the community service work crew already had been participating in programming at our district, doing a number of habitat restoration projects and stream restoration and that sort of thing. And so they had been an existing partner. And so we brought them on when we started the GRACE project. And so in addition to the GRACE project, now we've kind of like expanded what we're doing to really promote healthy farms and the food system and the connections and interrelationships between community health and access to fresh fruits and vegetables for underserved communities in our county, as well as the relationship between healthy farms and working landscapes and farmland preservation and all of those connections. And so that is really kind of the focus of what we're doing here now at the GRACE project. And oops, that's not what I wanted. There we go. So really what we're focusing on with the GRACE project is building a healthy, sustainable, equitable, and resilient food system. And if the COVID situation has demonstrated nothing else, is that we have some gaps. So we're doing technical assistance workshops, building partnerships, and the other thing that we're doing is farm to food pantry, and we talked about that a little bit a couple weeks ago. And I see that Nicole Garden is on the call, and so she can jump in here anytime. But one of the things that we have focused on is like building the relationships with our communities that traditional conservation services haven't really done outreach to. And so we do a lot of gardening workshops at the food banks, and we have a relationship with the Kitsap Community Resources. And so we do workshops. In the picture here, there's a workshop that we're doing for their, it's a healthy living series that they do for Work First clients. And so here we're doing lettuce bowls and talking about container gardening. And so these are folks that we haven't done at least in our office, since we work with a lot of landowners and we're working on water quality issues and farming, but this is an avenue that we haven't had not spent as much time really pursuing. And so as a result of the GRACE grant, we've been able to do a lot of that. And the exciting thing about this is helping people connect their understanding of environmental issues with the food system and how they're eating and nourishing their bodies and all of the rest of it. And so that has been really an exciting thing. It has brought a lot of goodwill and positive community feedback to our district, which has then snowballed into more people wanting to know more about what we do. So, in some ways people don't really care what you know until they know that you care. And so that's some of the things that this project has really opened up. We've had a couple of articles in the newspaper, and we did a thing with the potatoes and got an article in the newspaper. But the other thing that we focus on is that we have, we do technical assistance. So we're growing on about an acre now. Originally it was supposed to be a lot smaller, but we keep expanding that. This was a picture that was taken about 2 weeks ago. One of the things that's in that picture is some garlic. So early on in the grant project, we surveyed the food bank clients about what they really, the foods that they really preferred and that they didn't get a lot of. And one of the things that came up was garlic. And most of our food banks do a really great job with reducing food waste. They do a lot of grocery rescue. But there's a few things that they don't get, and garlic is one of them, because lettuce, it gets close to the pull date, and so they send it to the food pantries, but garlic doesn't really seem to go bad. And so anyway, so we've been growing garlic. We grew about 500 pounds last year, and we're getting ready to harvest this year, and so we're pretty excited about that. We also do about half an acre of pumpkins and squash, and last year we did about 2/3 of that in pumpkins and about 1/3 in squash, and this year, because of COVID and really thinking about what people are going to be doing and food insecurity and the demand at the food banks. We have a few jack-o'-lanterns out there, but it's mostly squash. A lot of butternut squash that's out there. And so we grew, I think we grew like 10,000 pounds last year. And so that is, so that's where we're at. Last year, we sent them a little over 20,000 pounds of produce to not just the Central Kitsap, but all of the food banks in Kitsap County. And that equates to about 16,550 meals. A little bit of food bank math, about 1.3 pounds of donated food equals a meal, inclusive of packaging. But as and so that you're like, wow, that is a lot of produce. That's a lot of kale and lettuce. But in 2019, the CK Food Bank alone distributed almost 730,000 pounds of food. And so our contribution is about 3% of all the food that they distributed. And so we have quite a ways to go. But like as Ron indicated, one of the things that's been kind of a challenge is building capacity in our system for refrigeration. When I came on with the grant a couple of years ago, I asked people, I said, okay, so what would you do with an extra 500 pounds of produce a week? And they were like, well, that would be so amazing, but that's not going to happen. And by the middle of 2018, we had already inundated CK, and so we were starting to distribute to all of the other food pantries. And we also have been providing technical assistance to a number of other community gardens. And there are several of them that are now ramping up production and getting into the same kind of productive level that we are. And so now the big issue is, do they have enough refrigeration? Which is where the delightful Nicole Garden has been so helpful, because there is some money available. And so one of the things that we've done is we've applied for about $27,000 to purchase some additional refrigeration and freezer capacity, because and Ron indicated this as well, if you're just giving people butternut squash, that's great. It increases their access to healthy food. It's a healthy, nutritionally dense product. But a lot of the folks who are coming to food pantries may not necessarily have access to, they might not have access to a stove. They might only have access to a microwave because they live in a motel, or they might be working a couple, 3 jobs. And so, you know, cooking a meal that's going to require that sort of preparation might be challenging. They may not have the skills and abilities because they haven't prepared a lot of fresh vegetables. And so, like, one of the things that we're doing as part of this capacity building grant that we've applied for is looking at ways to process that. And so we're exploring opportunities to partner with some local restaurants to have them do the food prep, because we just don't have the bandwidth at this point to start producing butternut squash soup. But the other thing that we've done that's really kind of a meaningful thing, and it's been, it's not happening as much right now because of COVID, and the Department of Corrections has stopped sending up community service work crews, but we're engaged in the restorative justice piece. And perhaps for me, the most rewarding thing about the project that we're doing is we're working with the women from Mission Creek. And we spend a lot of time talking about why we're growing, what we're growing. Most of these women have received food from food pantries, and they really feel a sense of pride and you know, competence, because they're able to grow this food and send it to the food banks. And they say over and over again, I wish that I had had access to this kind of food when I was going to food banks. And so here's a couple of our ladies, and this is you know, early July, late July, when we had quite an abundance there. And so we there they are packaging that. So the other thing that we focused on as part of this is really building partnerships in the community. And a lot of these are unconventional partnerships. We've spent a lot of time building relationships with the Kitsap County Food Bank Coalition. Some of the refrigerated capacity that we applied for is going to go directly to them, because they want to be able to offer more produce. And so we're excited to be able to do that. We have a connection with the Kitsap Harvest Gleaning Program. They're delivering to a lot of people right now who are shut in and can't get to the food pantries. We've got a relationship with the Department of Corrections. The Department of Corrections right now, because they have so many of their programs that are turning inward now a little bit because they can't go out in the communities, they're ramping up gardening activities at their facilities. And that is part of a partnership too with the Sustainability in Prisons Project, which is out of Evergreen State. And so they are planting gardens. So one of the things that we're doing is we're providing them with plant starts, and then they are harvesting that, and one of their staff members takes it down to the food bank in Belfair, in addition to providing it for the institution. And so that's been kind of an exciting thing. And then obviously partnering with WSDA and their food assistance program and Rotary Harvest Against Hunger as part of the Farm to Food Pantry program, which has been tremendously impactful in our county. We've been able to leverage community support, and this year we received about $5,300 from the Farm to Food Pantry initiative, and we were able to match that with an additional $7,000 from community donations. And so we've seen investment from Multicare and Kaiser Permanente, because they're concerned about health outcomes, and this is a great program to do that. And we're also having conversations with the local Peninsula Community Health about a pharmacy program and getting produce to them. So we've done kind of a lot of different stuff, and a lot of this just kind of evolves as we go, and I start having ideas about, well, what if we did this? And so fortunately, my district supervisor is very gracious and she lets me run with a bunch of this stuff, which is a good thing because we've been able to do some tremendous good in our community. Any questions?
Thanks, Diane. That was great. Any questions for Diane? I also wanted to see if there was any other district staff from across the state on the call who might want to share what's happening in their office as well.
I did see somebody from Snohomish, and I know that Pierce is doing a bunch of stuff, particularly with their community gardens. Harvest Pierce is connected with the Pierce Conservation District. Is there anybody from Pierce on the call?
Doesn't look like it. But I know that they've also been really instrumental in helping support meat infrastructure in the state with the leasing of their mobile slaughter unit. So it would be great to reach out to Pierce in the future. And I think some of the other conservation districts that are really focused on leasing equipment. I know Spokane also has equipment for lease. And Pat Muntz, I know that you're on the call. Do you have any additional information about some of those programs in Spokane?
Well, I know the Spokane Conservation District has a person that's designated to be working with small farms, and they're trying to figure out their niche. As far as equipment that they rent, as far as I know, they have a manure spreader that they have. But then they also have their vets on the farm, working farm, which is donating quite a bit of stuff into the community. I don't know if they're kind of expanding their outreach to beyond veterans this year because of the COVID situation, but they're getting something off the ground, and in the future, they bought a 20-acre piece of ground that was an old gravel mine and asphalt plant that has some really unique features on it, and they're planning on doing some demonstration growing areas, and it would be a really good area for that, for small scale. You know, maybe some urban space for a good sized greenhouse.
Mm-hmm.
So I think in the future, they're going to be, you know, a pretty strong player in the field.
That's great.
Yeah, I'm over here from Snohomish Conservation District. This is Bennett LaFond.
Great.
Yeah, we have a manure spreader as well that we have a share program with. I personally have only been at the district for a very short period of time, so I'm still getting familiarized with all of our programs. But if you were to talk to David Jackson, he would have some pretty good information for you, I think, on some of our community garden programs and some of those community agriculture initiatives that sound kind of similar to what you're working on with the Grace Project.
Yeah, I know that Pierce also has a no-till drill, and obviously WSU Puyallup has been doing a whole bunch of work on no-till organic and cover cropping, and that has been something that has been really valuable in their community. They also have a manure spreader and poultry harvesting equipment. And I know that Mason Conservation District, WSU and Mason Conservation District had a relationship, and they also had poultry harvest equipment. They had a plucker and a scalder. And so for, you know, getting folks going in pastured poultry, that was one of the things that kind of jump-started things, at least in our region, was that rental program. And so sometimes that investment in infrastructure, I mean, it might seem like a really small investment, but then what it does is it gets people into the marketplace with, you know, particularly where protein is concerned. The other thing that we have done too is we've done a bunch of work in education on produce safety, and we received a bit of additional implementation money from the Washington Conservation Commission last spring. And so we installed a produce washing station, and basically it was just a covered area. We have a hand washing sink. And so we've been also doing education and outreach with our local farmers market farmers about, you know, easy and low low investment ways that they can, comply, even though they're not required under FSMA to comply with like all of the good handling practices and the produce safety regulations. It's obviously really good practice for them to do so because they want to provide a safe and nutritious product to their community. And so we've also been focusing on that. The other thing that we do is we have a cistern system that provides irrigation water here at Kitsap for the Grace Project. And so we have 5 cisterns and collect the water off of our high tunnel. And so we have a reserve of about 50,000 gallons of water that will irrigate most of that acre for most of our growing season. So, and then we're doing the year-round growing. So, kind of modeling some of those things that our farmers just kind of to increase their economic viability. And so that we can, keep the farming community going.
Definitely. Yeah, I know that we're really curious too about some of the other conservation practices you were talking about, such as a no-till drill system. I think the question there has mostly been how to fund something like that. What kind of funding does that kind of equipment stuff? And for us, I know that the manure spreader has been a bit of a logistical challenge as far as where to keep it and how to manage who uses it.
Yeah, and I see here that Nicole Garden also mentioned that Thurston County has poultry equipment for rent as well. So that's good to know. And I'm wondering, like in terms of during COVID, have any of your sort of rental policies changed in terms of access to equipment?
Well, I know that, and I'm just thinking about like how our office is close to the public now because Kitsap is in stage 2 and like hopefully, fingers crossed, we may be moving to stage 3. We've been able to set up appointments. And so, for example, we have a rain garden or a rain barrel program. And we just have, a segment of during the week when we set appointments and people are able to come and, we're masked and we do the social distancing and we have the handouts and we're able to do that in a way that our clients feel safe about. And so I would imagine the rental programs are in much the same situation with regard to where their county is at, which stage their county is at. So, I mean, that's kind of how we've been handling it as we try and manage the challenges of COVID.
I also had a question, and I don't want to dominate the question, so anyone else who has questions, please put them in the chat box or just chime in. But I wanted to know, I know that you've been really involved in the Farm to Food Pantry program, and I know Nicole Garden's also on the call as well. Are there other district offices across the state that are also participating in the Farm to Food Pantry program?
I believe that we're the only one who is participating in the official, we're the only county lead that is in the Farm to Food Pantry program. And it's kind of a diverse group. In some cases it's WSU, in some cases it's a food pantry, in some cases it's a community action center. Just kind of like, it's really uniquely tailored to the needs of each unique community with regard to how the county, how the area administers it. But I do know that King Conservation District has their Farmer Share program, which you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it was originally funded through a levy that King County passed. But it does basically the same thing as the Farm to Food Pantry, which is that they connect with local farmers, and that produce then goes to the food pantries. And for us, it has been tremendously impactful, especially this spring, because we had all of these farmers that had wholesale accounts with local restaurants. And when shutdown happened, I'm like, we would be happy to buy your produce. And so I think we have 12 farmers right now and something like $11,000 out on contract, and a lot of it was for early spring, and then a bunch of it's for squash this fall. So, I mean, the food banks get a lot of produce donated in the summer from the Grow-A-Row, and our local gleaning network has been very active in promoting the Grow-A-Row in connection with the Master Gardeners.
And what about other, and this is really directed towards anyone associated with the conservation districts, you know, services like soil testing and farm planning, are those still ongoing by appointment, or are those things that have been put on hold because of COVID?
Carrie, you want to take that? Or Ron?
I want to digress oh, go ahead.
Yeah, before I just wanted to say that a lot, it depends on the conservation district and the services they're providing and how their office is open and working. But most districts, in most places in the state, except for places like Yakima, Franklin, that are still in phase 1, most are starting to reopen, and we're working with districts to make sure they have policies in place for how they're engaging landowners with social distancing and wearing masks and so forth, and still be able to provide those services.
Great, thank you. And I know, Carrie, you were going to say something?
KCD has a farm equipment rental program too, with a manure spreader and a no-till seed drill, and a chicken processor and a couple other pieces of equipment. And for our SOP to get that program going, again, we're leaving 3 days between deliveries. So usually the cooperator would come pick it up from us, but just to make sure we have everything wiped down and to reduce the risk of spreading the virus, we're doing deliveries to your house now, and then we're leaving 3 days in between the time we pick it up before it goes out to the next client, just to kill anything that might be lingering around. So that's how we're getting around it. And then we had suspended site visits. We have started site visits back up, as long as the cooperator signs an agreement beforehand that they know we're coming, we'll stay outside, we'll both wear masks. And then we gave staff the option of being able to take their own vehicle. We do have an SOP for wiping down KCD vehicles once you drive them, but there's just a lot more potential to spread the virus in an employee car. So staff has the option to take their own vehicle now. So I can share those SOPs with people if they are interested in them.
Yeah. We have similar SOPs. The other thing that with regard to farm planning is that because there's a lot of upfront prep work with GIS mapping, and we have a brief survey, resource assessment survey that we go through with our landowners, and usually we do it in person, but now we've gone to a digital format, and so we have a tremendous amount of the legwork around farm planning that can be done without contact. And so even while we were shut down, we were still doing a bunch of that. And then we were able to, once we opened up, do the actual site visit. But a lot of that technical assistance with regard to, questions that people had about, how to manage manure and those kinds of things, we were able to share a bunch of resources as well. So there was an awful lot that we were able to do electronically.
Bennett, were you going to say something as well?
Oh, I feel like that pretty much covered what we're doing as well. We've started to get back out into the field in kind of a limited way. Generally, it's pretty easy to coordinate at this point, because when we're going out somewhere, it's because somebody has asked us to go out there, and so we can find a way with them to keep things safe and socially distanced. Last week that our farm planners are starting to get back out and do those site visits, but I know that it's kind of just been kicking off in the last week or so.
Are there questions for the conservation districts that we have on the call today?
Hi,
or the State Conservation Commission?
I had a question. Hello, I'm Henry Gardner. I'm an intern at WSU Extension this summer. Thank you for having me on the call. It's been really cool to hear about all the things going on. I had a question for Diane. You mentioned, I think while you were talking, the program about getting the prisoners involved with gardening on site at their like incarceration sites. I was just wondering if like if the prisoners are getting access to that food that they're growing on site, or where that food that they're growing is going.
Well, it depends. Like at Mission Creek, one of the things that they have is they're out in the middle of the woods, and so they have an area that is fenced because deer are an issue out there. And so they have probably about 1/4 of an acre inside the institution, inside or adjacent to the common area, the controlled access area. And so they go out with a supervising officer, and they have some support from their grounds crew. But like at Stafford and Monroe and several other of the Department of Corrections facilities, I know that Stafford, for example, they have a huge farm at their facility, and they provide upwards of 30,000 pounds of produce to coastal community action and over in that part of the state. And so it really depends. The Sustainability in Prisons website, if you want to go take a look at it, they have an annual report, and they talk about all the programs. They're doing a whole host of resource conservation programming and habitat restoration. But in the case of Mission Creek, we supply them with the plant starts, and we had a bunch of seeds donated, so they've been doing a bunch of that. They also have some raised beds inside of their controlled access area where they grow tomato plants and that sort of thing. But it goes to the North Mason Food Bank down in Belfair, because that's they're like 3 miles from the town of Belfair. So that a lot of them have access to growing spaces inside the institutions. Interestingly, our program is not the only one that uses a community service work crew. The Emergency Food Network in Pierce and South King has a relationship with the Women's Correctional Facility, Washington Correctional Facility in Purdy, and they have a crew that goes out to Mother Earth Farm, which is located in Puyallup, and they do all the work. And Mother Earth is about a 5-acre farm, and so they grow for the Emergency Food Network in Pierce and I think South King. So they have a lot of stuff going on. We're fortunate. Mission Creek is a low risk, low security facility. So we do have access. Spokane County also has another work program. But a lot of the other Department of Corrections facilities, they don't have, because of their security needs of their community, they don't have community service work crews. But one of the things you might, if you're interested in partnering, one of the things that a lot of the sites have is work release sites. And if you have an opportunity in an agricultural or natural resource kind of activity, that maybe you might want to do some connecting with the local work release site. We have one in Port Orchard, and they do extensive work at the South Kitsap Helpline Food Bank.
The Airway Heights Corrections Facility, which is state, just outside Spokane here, has a huge garden that also grows a lot of stuff. In our county jail, their Geiger Heights facility has a farm, not big, but they donate several thousand pounds a year to local food sites and food banks here in Spokane.
Yeah, I should note that during the summer, during the peak of the season, there's some nuances to donating food to the correctional facilities. You're supposed to be a vendor and all the rest of that. But we've kind of come up, we've had enough of a relationship with them that we have a little bit of a workaround. And so we do donate to the kitchen at Mission Creek. But the caveat is that if we're going to donate lettuce, we need to donate enough so that they can prepare it and everybody at the institution can have it. And so, you know, about twice a month during the summer, we'll take them out, you know, 2 or 3 crates of lettuce, or, you know, a variety of, usually they get zucchini and cucumbers too. But that is something that we do because the women who are working in the garden are really proud of what they do. It is the thing that they like doing the most on the work group. And so because of security clearance, we can't say, oh, by the way, we're sending this today to the institution, but we do donations to the institution as well, so that they can have access to some of that produce, because their food is a little institutional.
Great, and I see here that Jason also mentioned he's with Veterans Affairs, that in Ording, the Veterans Farm is also working with the Cedar Creek crew. So this seems like maybe something that even over the next few weeks or months that we could have a whole hub topic focused on looking at restorative justice and working with different correctional facilities across the state to support food systems work. Other questions for Carrie, Diane, or Ron? Or we also have Bennett on the call from Snohomish.
Sorry, what was that?
Oh, if people had questions for any of you.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, I really want to thank all of you for participating today on behalf of the conservation districts. And I hope that in the weeks and months to come that we can hear more about the programs, especially the results of the survey, and how across the state as resource providers, we can continue to support what's happening in the district offices in terms of providing resources to support the Washington food system. So really excited to hear what's going on. And you know, we can just open up the call. We still have time to just talk about general topics, anything else that people want to share, events coming up, trainings, new resources that they're aware of. This is a great time to be able to either put something up in the chat box that we can read off to the rest of the group, or go ahead and unmute yourself and let us know what's going on.
Laura, I just had one question to maybe throw out to this group. It's a request that I just sent out through our food systems team listserv, and myself and several other colleagues are kind of on the search for any existing lists or resources for BIPOC owned farm and food businesses in Washington. So if any of you out there know of any existing resources or have any yourself, that'd be great if you wanted to share those in the chat right now. I know there's some really great ones that I've already been sent from. EcoTrust has already created a great page. And we're aware of many of the organizations that are doing work, but specifically looking for BIPOC owned farm and food business list of some sort. Or we're going to be working on creating it. So if you'd like to collaborate on creating that, please reach out as well.
Great, thanks, Nicole. And I also see that Diane Smith shared some information about Department of Labor and Industries released a training kit on the agricultural requirements for COVID-19. She says here, the safety and health toolkit will help agricultural employers comply with employee education requirements. Employers are required to comply with agricultural COVID-19 requirements and provide adequate educational materials in the language or languages employees understand. And the kit is currently available in English and Spanish. And Diane, is that available on the L&I website? post a link to that on our COVID
Yes,
Hub.
it is. Let me see if I can find that link.
Perfect. Thank you.
I had a quick question for Nicole, who mentioned that Jefferson County recently got a keyline plow. I'm curious kind of what the driving factor for that was, if that was out of farmer interest or programs that they're pushing forward.
I would say it's kind of two-pronged. One, the conservation district manager there is a permaculture buff himself and is really interested in it. And two, the kind of the most available agricultural land out here, or kind of the most utilized, is really old hay and pasture fields that have been kind of hayed and hayed and hayed without any real kind of management or fertility management. And so it was an opportunity. There was some very specific funding around soil health. There was an opportunity to get a grant, and Al was able to get that, to invest in that. And it's just something that there are some other producers in the area that are really interested in doing on contour plowing and different kind of permaculture and water mitigation techniques in the area. So I don't think they have any other equipment at this point that they have available. I think it's kind of the first item that they would like to add to a line of things that would be available.
Do you know what that funding source was?
I was trying to find it in my email, but I can't remember. I was just kind of, I don't work for the conservation district or anything.
Yeah.
I just happen to live in Jefferson County. And Al had reached out to me about it a while back and said that there was funding available. I'll search in my email for a moment, and I probably will be able to find it, and I can message you.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Sure.
So we have two other updates in the chat. The first is about the farm, King County. They have a website that they're putting together. It's called the Local Food Finder. And it's an interactive map that will allow consumers to search for local food-based products, location, and types of sales outlets. And this is going to be specifically for King County residents. It looks like it's going to go live in late June. And then there's an additional program that's going on as well that's statewide through the Eat Local First Collaborative, which WSU is also a part of. And the link to learn more about that is also posted. Cheryl Weiser posted that. It's eatlocalfirst.org, ELF_collaborative. And farms around the state are welcome to sign up on the Tilt Alliance Farm Guide website, as well as our WSU Farm Finder. And then we're going to be eventually transferring that information into the Food Atlas, hopefully when we get the LFPP grant. But until then, at least we'll have one main landing page for all of the different resources across the state to look for access to purchasing local food. And Cheryl's put her email up there too if you have additional questions. It sounds like we'll need to make sure that on the ELF website, we also have a link to the King County site as well. And Diane just posted about Skagit Food Map as well. I see this as an ever expanding project where we'll have a landing page, and hopefully that one landing page people can go to then find links for regional resources. And that way, regardless of the grant funding, we'll at least have a specific, a single URL that people can go to locate local food.
Laura, in the COVID call on Monday with King County, we learned about a really unique tool that Jennifer Anston, I'm not sure how you say her last name, but she spearheads all the farmers markets. And I didn't see her name on this phone call, but she told us about an online app called What's Good. And it's an online app for farmers markets. So I'll post the link. What she said, you either had to currently be selling at a farmer's market or intended to in order to be able to register your business on this app.
Great. That's a great resource to hear about.
Grab that.
Other updates or information that people want to share? I'll just put a plug in for our next meeting, which is June 26th. We'll start again at 10 a.m. We'll update our website with information that we got from this call, as well as other information that comes in. Just a reminder to take the NAT weekly if possible, and also send out to your networks, as well as the other survey that came out in collaboration with the University of Washington. And then again, send us your calendar of events so we can post those. Before we sign off, is there anything else that people might want to share? Or... Well, again, I just want to thank everyone for your participation. I hope that you have a lovely weekend and you get to also have some time today to celebrate Juneteenth, or at least learn more about it. Again, we just really look forward to hosting these calls every single week and making sure that you have access to networking with one another and the resources that are coming out to continue to support the Washington food system. So again, thank you all for participating, and we look forward to seeing you next week.